Clearer? Yes? Okay. So as I was telling you about the contents that we are going to discuss in this particular session, it's going to be about the importance of the optional to start with. How much weightage does this optional subject carry? And also, why it is so important to choose the right optional. And next, we are going to discuss the factors that are to be considered while choosing an optional. While many choose the optional on various parameters, we are going to discuss which are the most important ones which you are going to consider upfront, and then there are some of the factors, not so important ones, which you take into consideration as well. And then you have the pros and cons of almost every optional that is provided at this institute, that is Legacy IAS Academy. And we talk about other optionals as well. It's not that we leave out other optionals, we touch upon other optionals as well. Then why we provide only these optionals, not the other optionals. Okay, it's also about the numbers at the end of the day, as to how many people choose this as an optional, choose a particular subject as an optional. And then the success rates, the most interesting fact or the factor which students consider while choosing an optional, that is the success rates, that also we will look into. And finally, the general thoughts related to the optional. So these are the things that we are going to consider in this particular session. So if you have already chosen an optional, or if you have converged upon, let's say, 2 or 3 optionals to choose from, you must have done this exercise already. If you have not, you make sure you do it. So did you go through at least a chapter or 2 before making a decision on a particular optional? This is a must. You must do it even before you choose an optional. Even after I give all the factors to consider, you must do it. At least 1 or 2 chapters. These chapters have to be random chapters. They have to be random chapters of any optional you are choosing. And what you have to look out for when you read through these particular chapters of any subject, you have to check whether you have the interest or whether it is evoking interest or not. This is something you need to consider. Now, the first aspect is the importance of the optional. How important is the optional subject? The first thing is the delta is higher. What is this delta I am talking about? The delta I am talking about is just about the difference it is going to make in the scores. Say, a person who scores, let's say, in GS1, if a person scores, the top score is, let's say, 110. The least score for a person would be, let's say, somewhere around 70. The difference between these two is the delta. So that's 40. So the delta for almost every other subject you consider out of 250 would be what? 40, 45-ish. But when it comes to the optional subject, in each paper, the delta is very, very high. A person who has chosen a particular optional, any optional for that matter, high score can be as high as, let's say, 180. The low score can be as low as 40, 50. Look at the difference. The difference is almost 120, 130. So this difference is the delta. So the delta is higher. So if you want to make a huge difference to your score in the main examination, it has to be through your optional paper. So 2 papers, that would be 120, 130 in each paper. So the delta is very, very high. Same holds true, the delta is higher part holds true for another subject, that is your essay. Essay scores also vary in this range itself. A very good score of 145, 150 is achieved by some students. And a very low score also is achieved 40, 45-ish. So the delta is higher here as well. So whichever subject has very high delta, these are the subjects you have to be really careful about, and you have to put in a lot of work so that you can increase the score beyond the normal when it comes to the GS subjects. So GS subjects generally get stagnated at a point like 125, 120, there it gets stagnated. Beyond that, you will not be able to score. Why? Because everybody has almost the same knowledge related to GS subjects, and everybody will be, giving the same answers or writing the same answers. You can't expect the same in these papers. Clear? You have any doubts, you can ask me. Anything at all? Okay. Now the second thing related to the importance of the optional, it's a source of compensation. What is the source of compensation? For all the sins you commit in other subjects, that is your GS1, GS2, GS3, whatever sins you are committing in these subjects, those sins can be compensated for in your optional. This is very much true for the people who are choosing sciences as optional. If people are choosing sciences as optional, say for example somebody is choosing math as an optional, they have to focus a lot on their optional because they get the scores in ones and zeros. So I'll touch upon that aspect later. So they're going to spend a lot of time on that, because of which they will not be able to commit themselves a lot of time and energy on the GS subjects. So whatever you lose in GS, you can make the gains in optional. Okay, it is a source of compensation. And next, it is the knowledge transfer. This is true especially for the social sciences. If we speak about the social sciences or the humanities, if you choose humanities as an optional, there's a lot of knowledge transfer you can do. It doesn't matter which humanities you are choosing, knowledge transfer for sure will happen in your essay. That's for sure. However, there are some optionals which can be helpful in your general studies as well. But bear in mind, this cannot be the parameter for you to choose an optional. Clear? Next. What are the factors that we are supposed to consider? Here are the factors that we are supposed to consider. The first thing, the first and the foremost thing, this is the number one priority to choose an optional. Interest and curiosity. Without the interest and curiosity, you are not supposed to choose an optional. The reason why you are not supposed to choose an optional without interest or curiosity is because when you look at the syllabus of any optional, it is quite in-depth. It is something which is equivalent to your bachelor's and master's, I would say a mid part of it. So when you have the syllabus of almost 5 years condensed into a syllabus which you are going to study in 1 year and which is in-depth, you need to have that interest or curiosity. Otherwise, you will lose, you'll lose the interest and you'll not be able to study these particular, topics. And also, it's about how much difference you are going to make in your answer writing. You have to infuse newer points. You have to infuse, creativity into your answer writing. That becomes possible only when you dig deeper into the subject on your own. See, apart from the books you study, apart from the class notes, or apart from the material that you get, you're supposed to dig deeper and, lay hands on material related to the optional you are choosing. Something extra you have to do, and you have to add it in your content, in your answers. And for that to be done, you need to have the interest. So without interest, you'll not search for anything, you'll not dig deeper. That is why this becomes important. The first and the foremost thing to choose an optional is interest and curiosity. Now, sir, how do I know whether I have the interest or curiosity in a particular subject? That is why I asked you to study at least 1 chapter or 2 chapters, random chapters of any subject that is there on your mind, any optional that is there on your mind. The second thing is relevance and overlapping with the GS. When I say GS, it also includes your essay part. So this is the second thing you can consider, but I would say that this trumps interest, trumps the second aspect we are going to consider. Yes. So the most important aspect, interest. Second, relevance and overlap. So how much overlap, how much relevance is there for the GS? Say for example, if you consider history, there's a lot of importance of history for the GS part. Geography, that is true. However, geography and history are not the optionals which is for the faint-hearted, right? It becomes really difficult for some people to handle these subjects. Why? Because the content is so vast and you have to remember quite a lot of stuff, and the questions are also quite advanced. Now, relevance and overlap with the GS is second aspect you can consider. Thirdly, time to complete an optional. As far as I see it, every other optional takes almost the same amount of time to complete. However, some people do claim that anthropology is a subject which takes lesser amount of time compared to other optionals. However, I would, beg to differ with them for a reason. The reason is that anthropology you have to do, because many people are taking this as an option, you have to spend equally more amount of time in order to make your answers more creative. Otherwise, you will not be different from the rest of the pack. In order to become different from rest of the pack, you have to do a lot of answer writing, which will consume more time. Yes? So, time to complete, this is something which you can consider as well. However, as far as I see it, it is not a factor as such. 4, availability of resources and mentors. This is the fourth thing. There are some optionals for which it is very difficult to find the mentors. Sources are easier to find. However, this cannot be true for your literature subjects. For literature subjects, finding the sources is a bit more difficult. For the sciences also, it is a bit more difficult. Why? Because less number of people take these as optionals, that is sciences and literature. Because of which, the amount of sources that are produced in the market is also relatively lesser. Now, you have to go through the sources that are available, whether the sources are reliable or not, whether the sources are standard enough, are they good enough. You have to look into that first, especially literature and sciences if you are choosing. We'll see which are the optionals in a bit. And the next thing is mentors or the tutors for the answers to be evaluated. While you choose some optionals, there might not be the mentors or the teachers in order to evaluate your answers. That is something which you need to be wary of. You should be careful about that part as well. So, that is the mentors part. And next is answer writing style. This is something which you need to consider as well. Whether you are a person who writes elaborative answers or a person who writes point to point. So, point-wise answer writing, then you have to choose certain subjects. A person who writes very elaborative answers, for such persons, I would say philosophy is good for them, right? Point-wise answers do not suit that particular subject. Yes? So, you have to be writing subjective answers. So, the subjective bent of mind or the objective bent of mind also decides which optional you are supposed to take. We'll come to that scale as to where the subjects fall on that continuum. And next is the success rate. We'll be discussing that in detail. This is the 6th part. And the 7th one is the background, whether you have a background already. Now, many people might think that, sir, I have done my probably engineering in civil, right? Should I choose civil engineering as an optional? Now, that completely depends. How did you study civil engineering during your graduation? Somebody has a commerce background. Can I take commerce and accounts as an optional? Now, that depends how you performed or how you learned the subject during your graduation. Now, if you were outstanding during your graduation, then you have to do one thing. You just look at the PYQs. If you really have studied during your graduation properly, then when you look at the PYQs, you should be able to at least make sense out of 50-60% of the questions quite easily. If you're not able to make sense of, let's say, 50, 60, 65% of the questions, then I don't think you should be choosing an optional based on your graduation background. Yes, so that is your seventh one. As I told you earlier, all these are the factors people consider. However, the most important factor you need to consider is what? Interest and curiosity. This is the most important thing. Why? Because you have to keep your momentum, keep the motivation on for almost what? For almost 1.5 years. Now that takes a lot of effort, right? It would be effortless if you have the interest in the subject. Clear? Next, these are the optionals that are available. 48 optionals we were talking about. These are the optionals. So we would put the engineering, the medical science and the sciences under the science section. Okay, engineering, medical science and sciences. So these are all sciences itself. And then you have the literature part, which is separate. And then you have humanities A and B. This is the classification which is given by UPSC. This is how UPSC classifies, the subjects. Now, UPSC has given the data only in 2019-20. That's when it had given a report. After that also there is a report. However, the annual report of UPSC about the examinations. But the thing is, it has not given the data related to the optional subjects per se in the latest report. So whatever data we are going to look at is going to be based on the report that had given the data related to the optional subjects, that is 2019-20 report. Okay, so these are the optionals that are available, a total of 48, right? So in engineering you have 3, civil, electrical, mechanical, and in medical science you have animal husbandry and veterinary science, medical science, and then you have 22 plus 1 literature subjects, which is 23, and in sciences you have agriculture, botany, chemistry, geology, mathematics, physics, statistics and zoology. This is what you have in science. And humanities you have all these. Okay, in humanities, I was speaking about the continuum earlier, about the objectiveness of a subject and subjectiveness of a subject. So these are the most objective subjects, the sciences. These are very, very objective. You get the scores in ones and zeros. So you get very good scores, or you may not get the score at all based on how you have answered the questions. So it is going to be mostly binary in nature, ones and zeros. You are either completely correct or completely wrong. You can't be half right. In most of these subjects, that's how it is. Now, in humanities, on the other hand, you can be partially correct. But still, there are some subjects where you can write objective answers. There are some subjects where you can write subjective answers. For example, look at philosophy. Where do you have philosophy? So there's no mention of philosophy as such. Okay. Yeah, you have it here. So philosophy is the most subjective one, right? On the other hand, the most objective one is going to be your history. Yes, you have history here. That is very, very objective in the sense you can't change, or it is not based on your perspective. Philosophy is perspective based. History is not perspective based, right? Same thing holds good for geography as well. It is not perspective based. It is a fact based. So whatever is fact based becomes objective. Whatever is not fact based, where you have multiple perspectives, you can put in your own perspective, that becomes subjective. So subject to a person's viewpoint. So that is philosophy. So on one end of the spectrum or the continuum, you have philosophy, which is very subjective. On the other end of the spectrum, you have geography, history, which is very objective. All the other subjects fall in between. Clear? All the other subjects fall in between. Next, with this understanding, we'll go to the next part here. The success rates. So the most interesting part for most of the people, right? The success rates, which optional to choose. See, animal husbandry and veterinary science, the success rate is almost what? 18%. Now that is very, very high compared to all the other optionals you see. But the thing is, look at the number of people who appeared. It is only 16. Will say, yes, if we take more than 100, this is the best performer. 183. 183 people in commerce and accountancy, 20 people recommended, which is 10.9% success rate. If we consider more than 200 people, then economics is a subject which has performed really well. 26 people out of 243, which is 10.7. However, for you to choose these optionals, you should have a background. Yes? Without background, which is the subject you can choose? So agriculture, you need a background. Medical science, you need a background. Civil engineering, law, sociology is a subject which you can choose without any background. So that is a very good performer. Sociology, look at this, 1,263 people, 126 got selected, which is 10% success rate, which is good enough, which is really good considering people do not have the background as such. Anthropology is the next best performer. So 1,189 people, 108 people, 9.1. That is also a good performer. And then you have psychology. Zoology is there. Again, you need a background for that. So that is why you consider psychology. 164 people, 15 people got selected, 9.1. And then you have public administration, which has performed well. 705 people, 58, so which is 8.2. And then you have PSIR, political science and international relations, 1662, 137 and 8.2%, which are equal almost, public administration and political science and international relations. Now you see the reason why we provide optionals only sociology, anthropology, psychology and political science. Public administration could have been provided, but the thing is, the nature of the subject is in such a manner that it requires a lot of current affairs to be at your fingertips. At least 2 years of current affairs are necessary to be at your fingertips. That is the reason why that is not provided as an optional here. So these are the 4 that we provide: sociology, anthropology, psychology and PSIR, right? So when you look at optional subjects starting from the top till the last, so all these subjects, look at these, all these subjects require a background. These do not require background. Sociology, anthropology, psychology, public administration, PSIR do not require any sort of background, and these are the well performing ones. Chemistry, mathematics, zoology, they require background. Okay, so this is the reason only these optionals are provided. Clear? So this is the success rate, as you can see. Now the next one is related to the optional subjects which are literature based. Number of candidates that appear with literature as optional is relatively lesser, as I had mentioned earlier. So in this, the best performer, if you consider only the optionals where more than 100 people appear in the examination, Hindi literature is the best performer. Sorry, Hindi literature is not the best performer. You have Kannada literature. Yes, Kannada literature, 124 people, 17 people get selected, 13.7. That is the best performer. The next best performer is your Malayalam literature, which is 12.4%. And then you have, yes, more than 100, yeah, only 3 subjects. So if you have to choose Hindi literature as an optional, it is going to be difficult, right? Because look at the success rate, it is only 6.8%. True for even your English literature, if I am not wrong, yes, English literature, look at this, the number of people who are selecting is 31 and only 3 people get selected, which is 9.7. And look at this number, this is more important, how many people have taken. Okay, it is less than 50 people. Out of them, Only 3 people. You can't consider the percentage there because it is very less number of people writing the examination. Okay. So more than 100 people choosing an optional. These two, if somebody is choosing as an optional literature, Kannada and Malayalam literature, the chances are good. However, there are some caveats, there are some cautions regarding choosing literature as an optional. We'll come to that later. First, we'll look at anthropology as an optional. What are the advantages and disadvantages? So you have the pros on this side, cons on that side. So the first advantage, it is relatively less time consuming compared to other optionals, in the sense compared to the other 3 optionals that we spoke of. That is compared to your political science, compared to your psychology, compared to your sociology, or even your public administration. It consumes relatively lesser time, anthropology. Limited number of sources and easy to find the sources. The nature of the questions is quite stable. That is, the areas from where the questions are being asked has remained almost the same. So you see that, even in your GS, when you observe, there are some areas where there will be questions for sure. For example, in geography, monsoon related question is for sure. Pretty much the same way in anthropology as an optional, the questions that come in the paper will be pretty much from the same areas almost. And next, it is a good mix of both factual and conceptual aspects. So throughout the subject, you find some, facts. At the same time, you find some concepts as well. So I would say more fact-oriented, less concept-oriented, we can say. And overlap is with society. There's a bit of overlap, and with polity, very little. So it is forcefully, we are saying there is a overlap with GS, but yes, this is where you can find the overlap, right? Not significant, however. Coming to the cons, high success rate continuously. Over the years, when you look at it, anthropology has been doing well continuously. Because it is doing continuously well over a period of time. Sir, what if I have interest in certain subject and I have zero background in it? Can I still choose it? As I told you, if you do not have any sort of background, you have to choose an optional, which is going to be the ones I mentioned. Okay? So which are performing well at the same time, right, which do not require any background. I mentioned the 5 subjects. So here are the 5 subjects: anthropology, PSIR, psychology, sociology, public administration. But for public administration, the caveat is what? The caveat is just that you should have an idea of current affairs of 2 years at least. Okay? Now coming to the cons, high success rate continuously, because of which maybe, so there is no certainty to it. Maybe UPSC decides that for 1 year, the paper becomes really tough, so that the concentration of the students gets spread across other subjects as well. So this has happened with public administration earlier. This has happened with psychology as well earlier. Okay. So high success rate continuously is a risk factor. Risk factor in the sense, you never know when will this paper become really difficult. This is one thing you may have to keep in mind. Second, biology related terms are quite a lot. So people who have difficulty with the biology related terms, I think you have to give a look at it. Give a look at certain chapters and then make a decision about this particular optional. And diagrams, you have to be not outstanding with it, you have to be at least good at it to an extent. So you should, when you write when you draw a hand, it should look like a hand. It should not look like a leg as such. Okay. Next, it has less room for innovation in your answers. Why? Because it is the factual nature of the subject. So whenever you have fact-based subject, factual nature, if it is more within the subject, you have less room for innovating within the answer, right? You may change the structure, but you can't infuse your own thoughts a lot. Okay, so these are the cons. And next subject, so before we go to, this is the one I was talking about, continuous success rate. Look at this. The success rate in 2012 was 6.6% only. Look at this. It has continuously been doing really well over the years. From 2013 till this point, it has been doing really well. And look at the number of people. It has gradually increased. Yes, it has gradually increased. So that is the risk factor I spoke of. Yeah. So this saffron line indicates the number of people who have chosen anthropology as an optional. Look at the curve. It has been increasing. So there was a slight dip at some point and then it has increased. And when you look at the success rate, this is the success rate. The bars indicate the success rate. So you look at the bars. So they have been doing really well. 2015 was an outstanding year for anthropology as an optional. Okay. Next, we'll talk about psychology as an optional. Psychology as an optional, when you look at the content, it is highly relatable because it is about individuals. It's about people, how they think, how they behave. So why they do what they do as an individual. It is highly relatable. Second, there is only one book for paper 2, and along with that, the content that is available in the classroom. Apart from that, you don't get much of it from paper 2. 3, more room for innovation while writing the answers. Okay. So there is a saying about this particular subject, and ethics and philosophy. So psychology, ethics and philosophy. This is a saying of sort. Whatever you write will be right. Whatever you write will be right if you have understood the subject rightly. So whatever you write becomes right if you have understood the subject rightly. So that's how the subject is, the nature of the subject. Same holds true for ethics and philosophy as well. And current affairs link is pretty minimal, very minimal in the sense. Anthropology, there is a lot of research that happens, and it finds mention in your in your research papers as well, and it gets acceptance as well. However, in psychology, while research happens, the acceptance is relatively lesser, and at the same time, in the Indian context, the research happens lesser. So because of this, the CA link is quite minimal. You have to just understand and move on. Less to remember, more to understand. So do not confuse with understanding with is easier. The subject is very, very easy. No, the subject is difficult because of the understanding part. Understanding the concepts is a bit more complex here. Okay. And next, the concept complexity. As I told you, because the concepts are complex, understanding becomes difficult. More cognitive resources are required. Cognitive resources in the sense, you have to apply your mind quite a lot. Energy consuming. So cognitive thinking, right, that is related to thought or the thinking process. You require a lot of energy to do that compared to other subjects. Understanding the questions is difficult. As I told you, understanding holds the key for this subject. If you understand the questions right, I would say almost your 70% of the work is done. If you understand the question right, you'll be able to write an answer. See, if you're able to understand the question, it means you have understood the subject, which means you already know some content. So 70% of your work is done there itself. Many people do not even get to understand where the question has been asked in this particular subject. which chapter is it coming from. So if you are able to understand the questions properly, your work is done. But the thing is, understanding the questions is not so easy. And it has quite a few jargons, special words, which you might have not heard of earlier. That is something which you find in this particular subject. Okay. So special words only related to this particular subject you find here. Okay. The utility of this subject, so in the prose you have, apart from philosophy, essay. Philosophical essay, which is the second part of your essay. There are 2 essays you are supposed to write. There is a philosophical part as well. So that second essay, you will find it easier with psychology as an optional. And ethics also has almost 1, 2. So the first chapter is emotional intelligence, that is related to your psychology. And then you have attitudes chapter, which is related to psychology optional. Aptitude chapter is also related to psychology optional. So you have almost 3 chapters which are related to psychology. So that overlap you have with psychology as an optional. And next, look at the success rate. The success rate of this optional was good and is good. However, you find a difference here. It's a bit shaky. Look at this, 2018, it was only 7%. 2019, 9.1%. Before that, it was performing well. 2012, 7.9%. So this has been quite less at times. So the risk of choosing this as an optional is lesser compared to anthropology, right? Why? Because you already see there has been a downfall in the success rate at times. And look at the number of people. The competition is pretty less in this subject because of this 1163. This was the year the paper was very, very tough, right? 2012. After that, the year it was tough. Later on, look at the number of people choosing an optional. It has drastically fallen. It is 164. Last year, probably it was 112, 115, I guess. Only 150 people had chosen this as an optional in the main examination. Who took the main examination? Only 115 people were writing psychology as an optional. So competition is lesser. Success rate, is like this. And next, sociology. Of all the 4 optionals we spoke of, this is the easiest one, easy to understand. Why? Because this is related to the behavior of people, group of people. So how the society works, that's what this is about. You would be knowing almost everything that is there in the subject already. However, you have to get the perspectives. So it is reasonably relatable to your real life as to how life goes on. It is quite related to that. There is stability in the nature of the questions, as I had mentioned, related to your anthropology. There is stability in the nature of questions. Rote learning to an extent helps. People who are rote learners, who do the by heart, right, or the rote learning, memorizing, for them it can be handy to an extent. And it overlaps with a subject in your GS called society, Indian society and social justice. It overlaps there, okay? And then the negatives of this particular subject. CA on fingertips. That is, your current affairs should be on fingertips related to the social issues, socio-political issues. Current affairs should be on your fingertips. And when you start studying the subject, you start feeling like, because you know most of the content already, how the society works and all that stuff, how a marriage works, right? So what is a marriage and what is kinship? Because you know most of these things already, you sometimes feel like you are beating around the bush, okay? Very small nuances will be there. It makes a bit more confusing. At the same time, you may feel bored at times because you know most of the stuff. Less scoring potential because of this reason. You have to be very, very innovative when it comes to answer writing, because everybody understands the subject. They will be writing almost the same answers. If you want to write different answers, you have to do a lot of creative thinking. Yes, common answers, that becomes a issue. That is why less scoring potential. However, if you practice quite a lot, become creative in your answer writing, yes, you can get good scores. And ideological differences, sometimes you put across a viewpoint, maybe ideologically you do not resonate well with the person who is evaluating your paper. So you have to maintain that line in your answer writing, right? So your viewpoint should not be too radical as such. Okay. Next, the success rate of sociology. Look at this. The success rate has been good. 9.2, 10. Right? The success rate has been relatively good, and even the number of people who are choosing this as an optional is significantly higher compared to the other optionals we have seen so far. So while competition is more, at the same time the success rate is also more number of people are taking this as an optional. So again, the risk that runs with any optional where you have a lot of concentration of people is that of what? That of people, that of the paper becoming difficult in the coming years, right? That risk it runs. Next optional is PSIR, Political Science and International Relations. It's a good optional, very interesting optional. It has a overlap with IR, GS2 paper, International Relations of GS2. So if you study this as an optional, I don't think you will have to study the IR part whatsoever. You need not study the IR part of GS2 at all. Interesting paper too, which is International Relations. It is very, very interesting, highly dynamic. It is highly analytical paper as well. You have to do a lot of analysis. You have quite a lot of thinkers. Same holds true for your public administration as well, thinkers. Paper 1 is political history, right? It has an overlap with your polity to an extent. Polity is the paper, subject where it has the overlap with polity and governance to an extent. The cons is the twisted questions that you get. You get a lot of twisted questions. Analysis is required. You need to do quite a lot of analysis. You have to break down the questions further into smaller pieces and then look as to where it actually belongs, where the question actually belongs to, which chapter it belongs to. That becomes a bit tough. Success rate has been shaky. We'll look at the success rate in the next slide. Lengthy syllabus looks small on paper. It looks small on the paper. When you look at the syllabus copy, it looks small. But when you start reading, it never gets over, is what you feel. Less room for innovation in answers, especially paper 1. Paper 1, you don't have a lot of room to innovate, right? You don't have a lot of room to innovate in paper 1. Paper 2, yes, you have some room to innovate. So, success rate of PSIR, this is how it has been. Look at this, shaky. As I told you, it is shaky. There have been ups and downs, 10.9, 6.1, 6.3, 6.9, again 8.8, 9.4, 8, 8.2. So it has been up and down. So that's how the success rate has been. Okay. But the number of people who are taking this as an optional has remained on the higher side itself, right? So while the success rate dropped to 6.3, 6.1, 6.3 in the 6, still the number of people choosing an optional kept on increasing. Okay, so that is the nature of the paper. But why? Because it is interesting. Okay, still people believe this is a good optional, and it is a good optional, yes. Now the next one, when we look at the average success rate of these optionals in since 2012, if you take the average, anthropology average success rate is 10.28 of all the years starting from 2012. Okay, for all the years put together, if you take the average 10.28, psychology 10.98, and then sociology 9.78, and then PSIR 8.05, public administration 7.9. So whichever subjects have had the highest success rate in the last 8 to 10 years, those are the optionals that are provided here. So I think you found a reason as to why we provide only these as optionals. Okay. Next. When to choose sciences or engineering as an optional subject? When is it you are supposed to choose? So now you have an idea as to which one to choose amongst those four, right? Why you are supposed to put those four optionals on table while choosing an optional. You got an idea. Now for those people who are looking at sciences or engineering as an optional, these are the points you need to consider. You should have a very strong background. Very strong background. When I say a very strong background, you should have understood the subject. You should have loved the subjects that you studied in your background, that is in your graduation or post-graduation. You should have loved those subjects. Only then choose them as an optional. This is the first thing. Second, exceptional interest. That interest should have continued till now. Okay, even if you loved the subject, maybe you have lost the love, right? For that particular subject, even if you consider that to be a factor, the interest should be there even today. Then you can go with that as an optional. If you are choosing this as an optional, instead of saying you GS can be sidelined, I say that you must sideline GS to an extent. Why? Because the amount of time required for studying sciences or engineering subject is relatively higher. Okay, so GS can be sidelined or GS must be sidelined to an extent. Let's say, for example, if your split is like this, when you are studying normal optional subject, that is humanities as an optional, if the split is like this, 70-30 is the split of time and energy. When it comes to sciences, it should be somewhere around what, 55-45 or 60-40 even. This is how the split should be, the time and energy. So you are supposed to dedicate more time. So this is your optional, this is your GS. GS optional. This is how the split should be. Okay, more time should be dedicated for the optional if you are choosing sciences or engineering. And next, you have to consider a good mentor. You have to check whether there is a good mentor available or not. Someone who can evaluate your answers and guide you, right? Say, for example, if you have chosen math as an optional, you get stuck. Tend to get stuck in some of the problems. There should be someone to, actually help you out. Otherwise, you'll be stuck there for a long time. That should not be the case. So you should have a mentor or a coach. Choose this as an optional only if your target is the top ranks. Okay, top ranks, as in if you want to rank less than 200, 250, then this can be a good optional. However, consider all these, then only this. Okay, you have to consider all the others as well. So that is what I would like to say about the sciences or engineering. And next is literature. The factors that are to be considered: a good vocabulary, a strong vocabulary would be really helpful. Second, see, this is important. Why? Because you have to make sense of the questions that have been asked, right? So they are not going to be very lenient when it comes to asking of the questions where they use the simple words to ask questions. They are going to be complicated. So your vocabulary has to be strong. Zero spelling errors. Zero, near zero. Almost near zero, I would say. Okay, spelling errors. Grammatical errors should be negligible, almost zero grammatical errors. Good writing speed, which is equivalent to that of English. Why? Because you have to write the same number of words in your literature optional as well as you write any other optional. So, if these boxes are not ticked, then don't choose literature as an optional. I'm talking about the present. At the present stage, you cannot improve these things over next 2 months. This is something which should be already present in a person. It's like the aptitude for a language. Linguistic aptitude should be already present. If not, literature, not your pie, not your cup of tea. So, regional languages are better, as we saw earlier. Hindi and English as optional subjects, literature optional subjects, I would not suggest, just because of the reason we saw the success rates there, right? There's quite a lot of competition. At the same time, whatever competition is there, you don't enjoy the edge. Regional subjects, on the other hand, you enjoy some edge. Why? Because your papers will be evaluated by the people from the same state. Okay, you enjoy that edge. Next, some people may ask, sir, why should we not choose history, geography, economics? These are pretty much very, very helpful with your GS part. Why not these? Because they are highly factual, especially history and geography. Look at this, history and geography, highly factual, too much to remember. There's a lot to remember. So you might think that, sir, I like geography a lot. You have studied GS, you like geography a lot. But when you go into the depths of geography, okay, when you go into the depths of geography, especially with optional, that's quite a lot to remember, right? And then, interesting, but analytical questions are being asked for all the three. They are interesting, but a lot of analytical questions are being asked, as in, they may ask a question related to, in geography, we might be thinking about, in geography, they might ask question related to spread of malaria in India. Geographical spread of malaria in India, the factors related to it. But they had asked a question related to spread of malaria in South Africa. The geographical factors responsible. Now, that becomes quite a stretch to answer. And next, oldest, hence in-depth history and geography. They are the oldest. That is why you tend to get very in-depth questions. Why? Because they have exhausted almost all the questions, all the areas. Now, in-depth questions. Overlap, but interference. Overlap with your GS subjects, but there is interference. Interference in the sense, when you write answers, it's going to have a negative impact of sort, where you have learned too much history. You may bring in some of the perspectives which are not relevant to the GS part. Geography, you have learned a lot of geography and you write it in the answers. From the GS perspective, it is too much. So that can be the interference factor. And there are too many repeaters choosing history and geography. People have been preparing for the last 4 years, 5 years, and those people have history and geography as an optional. So the models, theories are highly dynamic, and it is highly dynamic. The economics as an optional, it is highly dynamic. So there are a lot of models and theories, and it is a very highly dynamic subject. And if you want to choose economics as an optional, foothold must, as in graduation, background, and interest in that particular subject is a must, right? So this is what we can say about history, geography, and economics. Next. Now, choosing an optional, people think that first rank people, what have they chosen as optional? Just look at the varied nature of the subjects they have chosen so far. Electrical engineering, PSIR, history, anthropology, public administration, mathematics, anthropology, Kannada literature, political science, geography, economics and Malayalam literature, medical science, psychology, public administration, law, public administration, Urdu, psychology, public administration, zoology, psychology, electrical engineering, maths. So this is from 2006 onwards. So you had 2 optionals till almost 2012, right? From 2013, it is only 1 optional. What you can observe is that it doesn't matter which optional you have chosen, the optional you have chosen, you must have interest. All the optionals have equal chance. Okay, all the optionals have equal chance, but you should have that interest. That is why you are supposed to consider the interest factor. Okay. Final words for this session. Do not choose an optional based on someone else's suggestion. Choose an optional for yourself and become responsible. You take the responsibility. You should take the responsibility of choosing the optional. That is, I am choosing the optional because I like it. You have to make the decision. Do not ask someone else to make a decision for you. I have given you the path to choose an optional. You choose according to it. Others causing you to choose an optional. If somebody has caused you to choose an optional, mostly you have chosen a wrong optional itself. So, if somebody pushes you to choose a particular optional, then highly likely you have chosen a wrong optional. Every person is unique, right? Every individual is unique. Some people are objective thinkers. Some people are analytical thinkers. Some people are subjective bent of mind. They have the subjective bent of mind. Based on your strengths and weaknesses, some people are very good at drawing. Some people are very good at, let's say, remembering the facts. Based on your strengths and weaknesses, you are supposed to choose an optional, right? You are all unique individuals. Accordingly, you have to choose an optional based on your strengths and weaknesses. You already know the nature of the subjects. I have already mentioned that. Next. Having multiple sources for general studies subject is useless. Always bear in mind, you have to have more sources for optional. For optional, more sources is good. Study as many books as possible for optional. Make your own notes. Look at this. It's a must. When I say notes is a must, all I mean to say is, let's suppose you have, the class notes. You attend some classes. It doesn't matter whether you are attending here or elsewhere. Class notes, that is the first thing. Second, you have the standard books or the reference books. Thirdly, you may get some printed material as well. What you are supposed to do while making the notes is this. Once this is done, you go home, take that particular topic from the syllabus, search all these 3 sources, you get the content, put all the content in your new notes, new written notes. For every topic, if you are able to make this, achieve this fiat, probably every optional, it doesn't matter which optional, will run into a range of somewhere around 600 to 800 pages of notes. Now, this is your master copy. You need not go through these books again. So, 600 to 800 pages of notes. Now, you are supposed to summarize these into, let's say, 100 pages. Make short notes of it. Now, keep revising these 100 pages, probably 4 to 5 times. When you have revised these 4 to 5 times, there is an advantage of making the short notes. You will be able to pick the points from various chapters in order to infuse them into the answers. 100 pages, you will be able to revise many times. 600 to 800 pages, few times. But these many books, you will not be able to revise multiple times. Until and unless you revise multiple times, you will not be able to write good answers. For that reason, making the notes is a must, and then the short notes is a must. And the best test series, if you want, write answers to all the PYQs starting from 2013 till date. Whatever optional subject you are choosing, all the PYQs, write answers, get them evaluated by your faculties or your mentors, get them evaluated. That would be your best source for what a test series or an answer writing. That is the best thing you can do. After this, you can take few test series or tests from somewhere else, from certain institutions you can take. But first exercise, you complete this task first. Okay? So that's about it. Thank you. Is there anything else you want to ask? You can ask me. Do you have anything to ask? Yes? No? Anything you want to ask? Okay. I assume you don't have any questions. If you have any questions, you can redirect the questions to the Legacy IAS number, right? That would be found on the website. Thank you all for attending. Have a very nice day, right? Hope the session was helpful. Thank you.